That's the question that we are here to answer today. One of the best gifts that a child can receive from a parent is a parent who has been there by caring for their parents, your grandparents, and a parent who doesn't want to be a burden. I'm Pamela D Wilson. If you haven't met me before, I am a caregiving expert advocate speaker with over 20 years of experience in the caregiving and aging space. And I'm here to share with you tonight ideas about planning for aging that include also why we don't plan for age or why we might delay planning for aging. So, on the topic of this, I want to start with some food for thought. If I told you in July of 2019 that on January 20th, 2020, about 2 years ago today, believe it or not, the CDC would have announced the first case of COVID in the United States, what would you have thought? Would you have listened? Would you have thought, what's a pandemic? What should I do about this? Or would you have said, I don't know about that. I don't know that. I know that she knows what she's talking about. And you know what? Why worry about it? I'll just worry about it when it happens. I'll deal with it then. That is how most people think about aging and talking about health and planning for health. A lot of people say, well, I'll live for today. I'll deal with it tomorrow. Or your parents probably say, well, my kids, they will take care of me when I'm older. But yet when I talk to parents and I say, well, have you asked your kids about that? Have you talked to them? They say, of course not. So look at how COVID has changed all of our lives. We've got changes in the workplace, how we socialize, healthcare, the economy, inflation, the list goes on and on. And you may even know somebody who has passed away from COVID. So much of daily life today seems out of control. It seems up in the air. But the thing that we do have control over is our responses and the way that we plan for the future. So the effects that you see from COVID relate a lot to the idea of aging and the lives of family caregivers who feel that their lives have been thrown upside down, that they're living on a roller coaster, that every day is different. There's one crisis or one family situation after another. If you work in the healthcare industry, you see this. If you are a caregiver, you experience this day in and day out. The lives of so many people have been permanently changed by COVID. And becoming a caregiver for a sibling or a spouse or aging parents who are diagnosed with COVID or cancer, Alzheimer's or dementia, heart disease, diabetes, that list goes on and on. It is a life-changing event. And that's why discussing and planning for aging is so important. So the question that I'm here really to help you think about is not right or wrong. Am I planning? Am I not planning? Why am I delaying? Why am I procrastinating? But the question that can help you be motivated to plan for aging is, what do I want my life to look like in 10 years or 30 years or 50 years from now? And I know this is hard to imagine. That's why talking and planning for aging is so difficult. Yet what I can tell you is that someday, maybe not today, maybe not 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, you will experience your own healthcare pandemic, whatever that looks like, whatever diagnosis that is for your spouse or your aging parent or yourself. And that pandemic, like we're having today, is going to take your life off track. It may destroy the dreams that you had for your retirement of driving across country in that minivan or watching your grandchildren grow up or going on adventures with your spouse when you're retired. Now, the truth is, life is going to end for all of us. We're all going to die from something. But would you rather be healthier longer or have a health diagnosis that affects your life for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and then you die? So we're going to talk about three things. The first is, why is it important to think of making a plan for aging so that you don't burden your family and that you have more choices in your life? We're going to talk about the effects of not planning. So, if you're a caregiver, many of you know what the effects of not planning are, but I'm going to share some realistic statements from caregivers that may shock you, that may make you think, wow, I should probably start talking about this in my family. And then we're going to talk about things to think about today as you move ahead and make this plan for aging. So, I want to start by giving a little bit of context because making a plan for aging is this huge, broad subject that could go on and on for hours. I could literally be here for weeks. But we're going to talk about making a plan for aging in the context of the idea of implementing change in our life. So, to talk about aging, you have to be ready and willing to talk about aging and caregiving in your family before events happen, preferably, although after they happen also works. And you want to be willing to make changes or to think about changes or to be a little more open minded because as we grow older, I know this happens to none of us, but sometimes we get a little stuck in our ways. We get a little stuck in our habits in a way, stuck in our thinking, stuck in the ways that we think life should be and our expectations of other people. And when caregiving enters the picture or health care issues enter the picture, all that stuff goes out the window. So, thinking about aging when you're young and healthy is a good thing to do. How many of you have grandparents who are still living that you see on a regular basis? Maybe grandparents that your parents are caring for. So, personal story. All of my grandparents, except my mother's father, passed away in the 1930s and 1940s of things that people still die from today, like pancreatic cancer and diabetes and tuberculosis, which is probably almost wiped out, at least here in the United States. Medical care back then was pretty non existent. So today people are living much longer. So, because our parents may have seen their parents die younger, 50s, 60s, 70s, they may not have planned very well. They may have thought, well, I'll probably live as long as my mom or dad did. And they're alive 10 years longer or 20 years longer. So they probably didn't plan as well. So when I was younger, I started experiencing deaths. My first funeral was at the age of 5. It was my mom's dad, my grandfather. And he remarried. So my step grandmother died when I was in my teens. My mom's sister, my aunt, died when I was in my teens. But I remember talking to my step grandmother about getting old. And she would just shake her finger at me and she'd say, "Oh, Pamela, getting old, it's just not good. It's not good. It's very difficult." And for some reason that stuck with me because I loved her. She was an amazing grandparent. And so change starts happening in our lives when we see loved ones pass away and we experience death, and or at the point that we or someone that we know is diagnosed with a health condition. And it could be anything like high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, COVID. And so at that point in our life, that's the time where we should be thinking about change and, wow, what should I do about this medical condition? What should my parents do about this medical condition? But a lot of times we don't even talk about these. We don't even know our parents have health conditions until they have a heart attack or something happens. But this was my experience in my teens when I saw my mother, who was sick for so many years before she passed away at the very young age of 69. So, in my teens and early 20s, after watching what was happening to her and remembering what grandma said about, oh, this aging thing, it's not good, I made up my mind that I was not going to be like that. I was not going to die of all these things that took all my family members at a very young age. So I started going to the gym. And some of you have heard my gym story, but God, my first aerobics class was it was pretty hilarious. I went and I thought, well, this can't possibly be that hard. It's just a bunch of dancing around. After an hour, my heart was beating. I was out of breath. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. I had no cardiovascular capacity or anything. And I want to say I was 21 or 22 when we really should be in pretty good health. So many of us, and research confirms this, we underestimate how healthy we are. We underestimate how healthy we're going to be, which is why we don't think talking about aging or healthcare or any of this stuff is at all important. But here's a big secret. The point of diagnosis, whether it's you or a parent, this is your golden moment, your once in a lifetime opportunity to to change the course of your life, to change the course of aging. But this doesn't happen unless there's somebody like my grandma who says, aging's not good, or watching my mom suffer, thinking, I don't want to be like that. We don't pay attention unless there's this knock on our door or this tap on our shoulder that says, pay attention. This is important. And the problem is, there's so much going on in the world, we don't have time to pay attention to anything. But in healthcare, patients always do not listen to doctors. Trust doctors. Go to the doctor. Get medical care. And on the other hand, doctors get tired of telling their patients to exercise and give up smoking and stop drinking and eat better and all these things because it doesn't happen. But this is such a missed opportunity for everybody. And it's not talking about what you're doing wrong or what you should do better. It's the idea of how do you want to live today and in your later years and when you're older. Think about this one. How many people do you know in their 70s, 80s, or 90s who are still living fulfilling lives, who are active? Now, Betty White, 99. She passed away this month. How many Betty Whites do you know? Blast from the past, how many Jack LaLannes do you know? I'll let you Google that one so you can figure out who he was if you don't remember. So let's fast forward to more motivation. You're 55, you're working, and you have to give up work because of a health condition. You're 65, you just retired, you had a heart attack, and now you find out that you need bypass surgery. You're 75, you have a lot of health conditions. You have to stop driving. Now you're relying on your children for everything. Groceries, doctor appointments, picking up your prescriptions. And these four walls of your home have become a prison. All of this, it's preventable if you think about taking action about change. Today you have a healthcare problem. Your parents have a healthcare problem. Medication, seeing doctors, all of that. If you can find motivation and determination to change, you can make a plan for aging. If you are already a caregiver for your parents, spouse, whoever, you're in the healthcare industry, you see what happens. It is hard to change. We're too busy. We're too ingrained in our habits. It's too much work. I don't have time. We all have a million excuses as caregivers why we can't take care of ourselves. How is it that we expect our parents or somebody else to do that? All of these things relate to making a plan for aging and health. And if you think about it, there are things that you do take care of in your life. Do you have a pet? Do you take care of your dog? Do you have a car? Do you take care of your car? We know that things that we take care of in life, animate or inanimate, fare better. They last longer. Your body is a machine. It's no different. So the question is, what will it take you to become motivated to start talking about aging and make a plan for aging? For me, I was very motivated by watching my family members pass away, caring for my mother for years before she died at the age of 69, and thinking, I don't want to be like that. So for me, in my 20s, I started learning about health and being active about health. And then it transferred into a career. 20 years of being a professional caregiver, court-appointed guardian, medical financial power of attorney for my clients, personal rep, trustee, managing care day in and day out, working with doctors and nurses in the healthcare system and assisted living communities and everyone, and seeing what happened to the care of my clients. But more importantly, seeing how all of these changes affected their families. So if you work in healthcare, you probably see situations every day that motivate you. I was in a meeting today where there was a discussion about CNAs and nurses working in hospitals and older adults coming into the hospitals, and these CNAs and nurses noticing that these elderly people hadn't bathed in weeks or months, or the elderly coming in being stick thin and being malnutritioned. And these nurses are saying, how does this happen? Why does this happen? And what can we do about it? Well, the what can we do about it starts right here. It starts with us. Caregivers in all areas of their lives put their lives on the back burner over here to care for everybody else over here. And they don't make a plan in the middle for what happens to themselves or help their aging parents make a plan because they don't know how to do that. So here's a little bit of insight to give you a little bit of motivation about why you want to start talking about this in your families, with your parents, even at work, with your children today, no matter how old they are. And these are situations and responses that caregivers that I work with in my one-to-one consultations and in my support groups talk about. Caregivers lose their freedom by becoming a caregiver. It's not that they don't want to do it, they do it willingly out of a feeling of responsibility or desire or duty. But many of you know this. You give up jobs, personal relationships. Maybe you can't spend as much time with your spouse or with your children. Caregivers who give up their jobs lose income. You're physically sick, you're emotionally sick. Caregiving has a lot of effects. It's like COVID just dropping into your life one day and giving the havoc that we've seen for 2 years now that probably is going to continue to go on. Caregiving goes on for days, weeks, months, years, and believe it or not, decades. Caregivers are very anxious because they can't fix a situation. They want to swoop in and take care of mom and dad and fix everything, but they don't realize that mom and dad have choices and mom and dad may not have the same ideas and they may not cooperate. That causes a lot of family conflict. Family conflict and judgments are huge in caregiving situations. One of my groups was talking today about the fact that, so married couple, middle age, say 50s, they have younger children. They're caring for their elderly parents. They asked their children for a little bit of help. A couple of the children stepped in and said, hey, we'll help. A couple of the children said, oh, we can't help. Parents are watching the division among their children, and the helping children judge the non-helping children. And the parents are saying, I don't want this conflict in my family. People should be able to choose whether they want to be caregivers or not. Yet, how many times do we place our expectations on other people, whether it's in the workplace, no matter what your job is, or whether it's in the family? Or how many times do your parents, aging parents, put their expectations of how they cared for their parents or what they think you should do on you? They think that you should be more available. You should take their phone calls 10 times a day at work, that you should do more for them, that you should do all of these things when you have a life that they have no idea what's going on. And you don't want to burden your parents with your personal problems, with your problems at work, with your problems with your spouse or your children or all of this. We don't want to burden each other, so we don't talk about this. But these are the things that we really do need to be talking about to make caregiving work. Then we have caregivers who want out of the situation, who've been doing it for so long, and they feel like there's no way that they can possibly say no. So they continue to do this, and it affects their health. And then they need care from their children. So we pass these caregiving issues down from generation to generation. So the question here is, what do you do about all this? How do you stop the generational passing down of caregiving responsibilities by beginning to look at your life today, by beginning to think about planning and look at planning as a positive thing that you really should devote a little bit of time to? Planning for aging is about how you want to live. It's about where you want to live, your retirement dreams after all these years of working. It's what you want to do for daily activities and your interests and your friends and your social life and the physical location where you will live. Now, this is a long list of things that we're not going to be able to cover here in this single broadcast. Separately, in addition to this live broadcast, there's information on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, hundreds of videos on my YouTube and my Facebook channels, articles in my blog, my caregiving library, my weekly podcast, The Caring Generation. All of these are based on my personal and professional experience. But let me give you an example of a family situation that you might find yourself in, and how talking about this before you're in that situation can make a night and day difference. So, elderly parents, a father who has dementia and your mom who's taking care of your dad. And you're not really involved yet because your mom hasn't asked you for help. But all of a sudden you start getting calls from your mom saying, wow, it's really a lot. I'm getting exhausted taking care of your father. I don't know what to do. It's starting to affect my health. I don't know how to respond to his repetitiveness, and he's up all night, and I need to sleep at night because I can't, be with him all day, and I'm afraid to leave the house, all these problems. And You might be living 2,000 miles away. And you might be thinking, oh, mom, she's making all this up. It can't possibly be that bad. This is where living a day in the life of a caregiver makes all the difference. That child came home for a 2-week visit. After that child left, they're like, oh my gosh, the situation with my parents, it's really bad. I'm not only worried about my mom, but I'm worried about my dad. Then you have maybe several children in this situation. And some of the children are pro mom. Some of the situation are pro dad. They're saying, well, who should get the care? Who should get the money for care? What are we going to do? Do our parents have legal documents to say what they want? How much money is there? Children get thrown into these situations overnight and everything goes up in the roof, over the roof, up the hills, up the mountains, in the sky. The volcano blows up. It's a tidal wave. It's a roller coaster. It's a big mess. So, wouldn't you like to avoid these situations in your family? Wouldn't you like to avoid conflict with your children and sometimes even estrangement? Children will just disappear out of family lives and never return because of all of this unnecessary conflict. Where, if you would make a plan and decide what you want and talk about it, that makes things easier. So, this kind of gets us into the third part of this. How do I plan for the care of myself or aging parents? It's being proactive. And so we'll talk about a list of things that you want to start thinking about or considering and talking about with yourself, with your spouse, with your children, in your families. So conversations can be difficult. My mother, years ago, God bless her, came to me one day and she said, oh, Pamela, you'll never guess what I've done. I am so excited. And I'm like, well, Mom, what'd you do? Guess what she started talking about? She told me that she purchased her and my father's funeral plans. And to the degree that what dress she was going to be buried in, and the music, and the flowers, and their gravestones were done. I was not prepared for that conversation. I started crying and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to think about you dying and death is a bad subject. And I was like, I was not in a place to have that conversation. My mom, though, was very wise because she had been through this with her parents. So remember what I said, the biggest blessing your parents can give you is to want to talk about this. The biggest blessing that you can give them back is to be willing to talk about it, or even to be willing to initiate those conversations if they are not ready to talk about it. When my mom passed away, and I'm on the plane flying home from California where I was living at the time, I was like, thank God she bought that burial plan. Same thing with my father, and I was the trustee of their estate. Thank God my mother was proactive. I didn't want to deal with it at the time. I was not emotionally prepared, but thank God, what a blessing. Be a blessing for your family members. Be a blessing for your parents. Be a blessing for your children. Be a blessing for your spouse. And talk about these things because they are so important. So if your children don't want to talk about it anyway. If your parents don't want to talk about it, persist and talk about it anyway. If you don't know how to have that conversation, contact me and I will help you and give you examples of how to do that. Second, health is what usually causes these aging detours. We are healthy until we are not healthy. One day we're healthy, next day we're sick. We have all these problems. All of a sudden, these problems arise. So, understanding your medical conditions when they first happen. Remember, I described that golden opportunity to make a difference for yourself. When you first hear or learn of a health diagnosis that you or a parent has, you have an opportunity to prevent that condition from getting worse by doing things that the doctor might recommend, or taking medications, or exercising, or changing your lifestyle. Remember, planning for aging is about embracing change and accepting change so that you can have the life that you want when you're older and have the blessings that you want from life. So, understanding medical conditions, why you take medications, the consequences of medical conditions, the consequences of not doing anything. Because you may have a parent or a grandparent who's never been to the doctor. They don't want to go to the doctor. They don't trust doctors. They don't want to follow advice. You know what? That's okay. But the conversation that you have then is, Mom or dad, I understand that you don't want to take care of yourself and you don't want to go to doctors and you don't trust them. I get it. I'm not going to push you to do that. But what we need to talk about is the consequences of you not wanting to do this. What do you want when you can't get up out of a chair? When you're malnutrition because you don't want to eat? When you can't move because you're not exercising? When you fall and break a hip? Who's going to take care of you? Where are you going to live? Is it going to be an assisted living? Is it going to be a nursing home? Are you going to have caregivers come into the home? How are you going to pay for this? Another interesting conversation I had today was about real estate. If you've ever bought a house, you know what that challenge is like. But things that we don't think of when we're young and working is what happens when we're retired and we're on a fixed income and everything goes up. Your HOA fees go up, groceries go up, cost of prescriptions go up, and you're on a fixed income. It's like you have this income here. And before you retired, your expenses may have been down here, but as the years go by, your expenses go way up and your income is way down. There's this huge gap that we don't think about until we're a parent's age and we're like, holy heck, how are we going to pay the bills? And how are we going to take care of ourselves? Learn about Medicare, learn about Medicaid, learn about public benefits, talk about money, talk about saving money, talk about why, yeah, you could go out and buy a new car tomorrow, but why not keep your car for 10 or 15 years and not have that car payment and save that money toward your retirement or toward long-term care insurance or toward something else? Talking about and making a plan for aging is uncomfortable. It's something that we would rather delay, and it does involve delaying immediate gratification, all those things that we think we want and we have to have today. If COVID has shown us anything, it's the fact that there are probably a lot of things that we want that we could live without. And COVID has shown us the importance of family relationships and talking about health and talking about caregiving. And the fact that change is going to happen, and changes are not always pleasant and not always easy. And the fact that once we become a caregiver, life can change, and it's an up and down situation. So whether you are young and you have no health issues in your life, or whether you're watching your grandparents age, or whether you're watching your parents age, start initiating these conversations in your family about, gosh, mom or dad, what do you want for care? Is there money to pay for care? Have you made your legal decisions? And talk about these most importantly for yourself, because all of us have a responsibility to ourselves to care for ourselves, to do things for ourselves, self-care, medical care, time off, time with friends, socialization. All of that makes a beautiful and fulfilling life, which is what we all want. But the problem is we all don't think about a beautiful and fulfilling life down the road. How to plan for aging for you or your elderly parents. Difficult subject. The best gift a parent can give a child is to have these discussions and make plans and let your children know exactly what you want and exactly what you don't want. So there's no disagreement in your family between your children or anybody else about, well, mom or dad wouldn't have wanted that. They would have wanted to be buried instead of cremated. Nope, we got to spend the money on dad who has dementia. Mom's not going to get the care, or vice versa. Eliminate all the family conflict, the family discussions, the toxic family relationships that don't have to happen when you talk about these things. Give the gift of making your own plan for aging to your children, your family members, and others who may care for you. And if you're a single adult out there and you don't have children, it's all the more important that you begin talking about these things today. I'm Pamela D Wilson. Thank you so much for joining me for this live broadcast. Please share it. Please tell other people about it. It will end up being a video on my YouTube channel so it can be shared with a lot of people. I so appreciate you being here. If you have ideas and questions for future live broadcasts, you can always contact me through my website at PamelaDWilson.com. That is where I get most of the ideas for the videos and the live broadcasts that I do.